Chapter 27. The lightsabers flashed, blue-white blade against green-white blade, sizzling where they struck each other, slashing through metal and cable where they hit anything else. Gripping the guardrail with both hands, fighting against the turmoil roiling through her own mind, Mara watched in helpless fascination as the battle raged across the throne room floor. It was like a twisted inversion of that last horrifying vision the Emperor had given her at the instant of his destruction, nearly 6 years ago. Except that this time it wasn't the Emperor who was facing death. It was Skywalker. And it was no vision. It was real. "Watch them closely, Mara Jade," Sabaoth said from where he stood at the top of the steps, his voice hard yet strangely wistful. "Unless you bow willingly to my authority, you will someday face this same battle." Mara threw a sideways look at him. Sabaoth was watching this duel he'd orchestrated with a fascination that bordered on the grisly. She'd called it all right, back when she'd first met him on Yomark. The work he'd done for Thrawn had given him a taste of power, and like the Emperor before him, that taste had not been enough. But unlike the Emperor, he was not going to be content merely with the control of worlds and armies. His would be a more personal form of empire. Minds reformed and rebuilt into his own conception of what a mind should be. Which meant that Mara had been right on the other count, too. Sabaoth was thoroughly insane. "It is not insanity to offer the richness of my glory to others," Sabaoth murmured. "It is a gift which many would die for." "You're giving Skywalker a good shot at that part, anyway," Mara bit out, shaking her head to try and clear it. Between her own memories, an echo of the strange buzzing pressure she was picking up from Skywalker's mind, and Sabaoth's overbearing presence 2 meters away, trying to hang on to a line of thought was like trying to fly an airspeeder in a winter windstorm. But there was a mental pattern the Emperor had taught her long ago, a pattern for those times when he'd wanted his instructions hidden even from Vader. If she could just clear her mind enough to get it in place. Through the turmoil came a sudden jolt of pain. "Do not attempt to hide your thoughts from me, Mara Jade," Sabaoth admonished her sharply. "You are mine now. It is not right for an apprentice to hide her thoughts from her master." "So I'm already your apprentice, huh?" Mara growled, gritting her teeth against the pain, and making another try at the pattern. This time she made it. "I thought I had at least until I'd knelt at your feet." "You mock my vision," Sabaoth said, his voice darkly petulant. "But you shall kneel before me. Just like Skywalker will, right? Assuming he lives through this." "He will be mine," Sabaoth agreed, quietly confident. "As will his sister and her children." "And then together you'll heal the galaxy," Mara said, watching his face and listening to the turmoil in her mind. Yes, the barrier seemed to be keeping Sabaoth back. Now, if she could just hold on to that privacy a little longer. "You disappoint me, Mara Jade," Sabaoth said, shaking his head. "Do you truly believe I need to hear your thoughts in order to read your heart? Like the lesser peoples of the galaxy, you seek my destruction. A foolish notion. Did the Emperor teach you nothing about our destiny?" "He didn't do a good job of reading his own, I know that much," Mara retorted, listening to her heart thudding as she watched Sabaoth. If that erratic mind of his decided she was a genuine threat and launched another of those lightning bolt attacks. Sabaoth smiled, holding his arms out to the sides. "Do you feel the need to measure your strength against mine, Mara Jade? Come then, and do so." For a pair of heartbeats she eyed him, almost tempted to try. He looked so old and helpless, and she had her mental barrier and some of the best unarmed combat training the Empire at its height could provide. It would take just a few seconds. She took a deep breath and lowered her eyes. No, not now. Not like this. Not with these pressures and distractions spinning through her mind. She'd never make it. You kill me now, and I won't be able to kneel for you, she muttered, letting her shoulders slump in an attitude of defeat. Very good, Sabaoth purred. You have wisdom of a sort after all. Watch then, and learn. Mara turned back to the guardrail, but not to watch the lightsaber duel. Somewhere down there was the blaster Sabaoth had torn from her grip when he did whatever it was he'd done to the mountains Ysalamiri and gotten to the Force again. If she could find it before Sabaoth realized that she hadn't really given up. Across the floor, Skywalker leapt up again to the catwalk. The clone was ready for the move, hurling his lightsaber upward right behind him. The blue-white blade missed Skywalker by a hair, slicing instead most of the way through the catwalk floor and one of the support struts holding it to the ceiling. With a tooth-jarring shriek, the strained metal twisted under Skywalker's weight, dumping him back off. He hit the floor more or less on his feet, dropping down to land on one knee. His hand reached out, and the lightsaber that had been falling towards the clone suddenly changed direction. It arced towards Skywalker's hand, and stopped dead in midair. Skywalker strained, the muscles of his hand tightening visibly as his mind stretched out. Not that way, Jedi Skywalker, Sabaoth said reprovingly, and Mara glanced over to see that his hand, too, was stretched out towards the errant lightsaber. The clone, for his part, was just standing there in his brown robe, as if he knew that Sabaoth would be on his side in this battle. Maybe he did. Maybe there was nothing left in that body but an extension of Sabaoth's own mind. This duel must be to the death, Sabaoth continued. It must be weapon against weapon, mind against mind, soul against soul. Anything less will not bring you to the knowledge you must have if you are to properly serve me. Skywalker was good, all right. With a strange buzzing pressure in his mind, he must have known he couldn't match Sabaoth's strength for strength. Mara felt the subtle change in his concentration, and suddenly he swung his own lightsaber over his shoulder, the green-white blade scything towards a point midway along the other's lightsaber handle. But if Sabaoth wouldn't let Skywalker disarm his opponent, he wouldn't let him destroy the weapon either. Even as the blade sliced downward, a small object shot out of the shadows to Skywalker's right, slamming into his shoulder and deflecting his arm just far enough for his blade to sweep through empty air. An instant later, the old Jedi had torn the clone's lightsaber from Skywalker's mental grip, sending it back across the room to its owner. The clone raised it to on-guard position. Warily, Skywalker got to his feet and prepared to continue the battle. But for the moment, Mara wasn't interested in the lightsabers. Lying on the floor, maybe 2 meters back from Skywalker's feet, was the object Sabaoth had thrown at him. Mara's blaster. She looked sideways at Sabaoth, wondering if he was watching her. He wasn't. In fact, he wasn't looking at much of anything. His eyes were unfocused, staring across the throne room, a strangely childlike smile on his face. She has come, he said, his voice almost inaudible over the clash of the lightsabers below. Just as I knew she would. Abruptly, he looked at Mara. She is here, Mara Jade, he said, pointing dramatically towards the turbolift she and Skywalker had come up. Frowning, not sure she should take her eyes off him, Mara turned her head to look. The turbolift door slid open and Solo stepped out, his blaster ready, and right behind him. Mara caught her breath, her whole body going tense. It was Leia Organa Solo, holding a blaster in one hand and her lightsaber in the other. And behind her, his pet Vornskers in front of him on leashes. It was Card. Organa Solo? And Card? Leia! Han! Go back! Skywalker called to them over the clash of the lightsabers as the newcomers moved along the walkway, past the galaxy hologram and onto the main part of the throne room. It's too dangerous! Welcome, my new apprentice, Sabaoth shouted joyfully, his voice drowning out Skywalker's as it echoed grandly in the open space. Come to me, Leia Organa Solo. I will teach you the true ways of the Force. Solo had a different sort of lesson in mind. He reached the end of the walkway, sighted along the barrel of his blaster, and fired. But even wallowing in self delusion, a Jedi of Sabaoth's power couldn't be taken out that easily. In a blur of motion, Mara's blaster leapt upward from the floor into the path of the shot, its grip shattering into a shower of sparks as Solo's shot expended its energy there. The second shot was likewise blocked. The third cut the blaster's power pack, turning the weapon into a spectacular fireball. The blaster was torn from Solo's grip before he could fire a fourth, and Sabaoth went berserk. He screamed, a horrible shriek of rage and betrayal that seemed like it would set the air on fire. Mira jerked back as the piercing sound cut through her ears, and an instant later nearly fell over the guardrail as the force equivalent of the scream slammed into her. It was like nothing she'd ever experienced before. Not from Vader, not from the Emperor himself. The utter animal ferocity, the total loss of every shred of self control. It was like standing alone in the middle of a sudden violent storm. Wave after wave of fury swept over her, ripping through the mental barrier she'd created and battering her mind with a numbing combination of hatred and pain. Dimly, she saw Skywalker and Organa Solo staggering under the assault, heard Card's Vorskers howling in pain of their own, and from Sabaoth's outstretched hands erupted a blaze of lightning. Mara winced in sympathetic pain as Solo was thrown backwards into the guardrail at the front of the hologram pit. Through the crackle of the lightning, she heard Organa Solo shout her husband's name and jump to his side, dropping her blaster and igniting her lightsaber just in time to catch the third blast of lightning on the green-white blade. Abruptly, Sabaoth shifted his aim upward to the damaged catwalk hanging precariously over their heads. The lightning flashed again, and with a crack of exploding metal, the center of the catwalk split apart. Pivoting on its last remaining support strut, it toppled ponderously downward towards Organa Solo. She saw it coming, or maybe Skywalker's training had taught her how to use the Force to anticipate danger. As the heavy metal swung down on her, she slashed upward with her lightsaber, cutting through the catwalk far enough to the side that the main part missed her and Solo as it swung past to crash into the floor in front of Card and the Vornskers. But there was no time for her to get out from under the end she had cut off. It caught her across her head and shoulder, knocking the lightsaber from her hand and hammering her to the floor beside Solo. "Leia!" Skywalker shouted, throwing an anguished glance at his sister. Suddenly, the debilitating buzzing in his mind seemed to be forgotten as his fighting abruptly shifted from groggy defense to furious attack. The clone fell back before the onslaught, barely managing to block Skywalker's blows. He jumped up onto the stairway, hastily backed 2 steps further up toward Sabaoth as Skywalker charged after him, then leapt over onto the remaining guard platform. For a second, Mara thought Skywalker was going to pursue him up there, or else cut through the platform base and bring him down. He didn't do either. Standing halfway up the stairs, a sheen of sweat glistening on his face, he gazed up at Sabaoth with an expression that sent a shiver down Mara's back. "Do you seek to destroy me, Jedi Skywalker?" Sabaoth said, his voice quietly deadly. "For such thoughts are foolish. I could crush you like a small insect beneath my heel." "Perhaps," Skywalker said, breathing heavily. "But if you do, you'll never have the chance to control my mind." Sabaoth studied him. "What do you want?" Skywalker jerked his head back towards his sister and Solo. "Let them leave. All of them. Now." His eyes flicked to Mara. "Mara, too." "And if I do?" A muscle in Skywalker's cheek twitched. His finger moved, and with a sputtering hiss, his lightsaber blade disappeared. "Let them go," he said quietly, "and I'll stay." From somewhere nearby, a dull thudding noise began, adding an irregular pulse beat to the eerie breathing sounds whispering through the cloning cavern. A blaster rifle pounding against heavy metal, Lando decided, giving the doors around the walkway a quick look. So far, they all seemed secure, but he knew that wouldn't last. The stormtroopers out there weren't firing at the doors just for target practice, and there was bound to be a bag of shaped explosives on their way. From the other side of the equipment column, Chewbacca rumbled a warning. I am keeping my head down, Lando assured him, peering into the gap between two large ducts at the maze of multicolored wiring and piping beyond. Now, where was that repulsor pump connection again? He had located the spot and was reaching in with a charge when the call beep from his comlink unexpectedly went off, echoed a fraction of a second later from Chewbacca's comlink. Frowning, half expecting it to be some hotshot Imperial tech who'd found his channel, he pulled it out. Calrissian, he said. Ah! General Calrissian, 3PO's precise voice came back. I see R2 has been successful in eliminating the jamming. Surprising, actually, given all the trouble which we've been required to. Tell him good job, Lando cut him off. Now was decidedly not the time for a pleasant little chat with 3PO. Was there anything else? Ah, yes, sir, there is, the droid said. The Nogri instructed me to ask whether you wish us to return to assist you. There was another thud, a louder one this time. I wish you could, Lando sighed, but you'd never make it back in time. The thud came again, and this time he distinctly saw the door opposite their bridge shake with the impact. We'll just have to get out of here by ourselves. From the other side of the work platform, Chewbacca rumbled his less than enthusiastic opinion of that. But if Chewbacca wishes but if Chewbacca wishes us to return. You won't get here in time, Lando told him firmly. Tell the Nogri if they want to be useful, they should head up to the throne room and give Han a hand. It's too late for that, a new voice put in, almost too quiet to hear. Lando frowned at the comlink. Han? No, it's Talon Card, the other identified himself. I came in with Counselor Organa Solo. We're up in the throne room. Leia's here, Lando asked. What in? Shut up and listen, Card cut him off. That Jedi Master of Luke's, Jorush Sabaoth, is up here too. He's taken out Solo and Organa Solo both, and has Skywalker fighting what looks to be a clone of himself. He's not paying any attention to me at the moment. There's some kind of face-off going on up there. But he would the minute I tried anything. I thought Luke said the Force was being blocked. It was. Somehow Sabaoth got it back. Are you down with the cloning tanks? We're above them, yes. Why? Organa Solo suggested earlier that there should be a large number of Ysalamiri scattered around that area, Card said. If you can pull a few of them off their nutrient frames and get them up here, we might have a chance of stopping him. Chewbacca growled mournfully, and Lando felt his lip twist as he nodded agreement. So that was what all those blasting disc explosions had been about. It's too late for that too, he told Card. Sabaoth's already had them all killed. For a long moment the comlink was silent. I see, Card said at last. Well, that explains that. Any suggestions? Lando hesitated. Not really, he said. If we come up with anything, we'll let you know. Thank you, Card said, a little too dryly. I'll be waiting. There was a click as he left the channel. 3PO, you still there? Lando asked. Yes, sir, the droid answered. Get R2 back on the computer, Lando told him. Have him do whatever he can to shift troops away from that air intake we came in through. Then you and the Nogri start heading that way. We're leaving, sir? 3PO asked, sounding astonished. That's right, Lando told him. And Chewie and I'll be right behind you, so you'd better move fast if you don't want to get stepped on. Better alert the two Nogri that Luke sent with that Miraneshi bunch, too. Got all that? Yes, sir, 3PO said hesitantly. What about Master Luke and the others? Leave that to me, Lando said. Get busy. Yes, sir, 3PO said again. Another click, and he was gone. There was a moment of silence. Chewbacca broke it with the obvious question. I don't think we've got a choice anymore, Lando told him grimly. The way Luke and Mara talk about him, Sabaoth's at least as dangerous as the Emperor was. Maybe even more so. We've got to try to take out the whole storehouse and hope we get him along with it. Chewbacca growled an objection. We can't, Lando shook his head. At least not until it's set and running. We warn anyone up there now, and Sabaoth will know all about it. Might have time to get it stopped. There was another muffled blast from the door. Come on, let's get this done, Lando said, picking up the last of his explosives. With luck, they would have time to rig Chewbacca's rhythmic resonance gimmick before the stormtroopers got in. With a little more luck, the two of them might make it out of the cavern alive. And with still more, they might be able to find a way to alert Han and the others before the whole storehouse blew up beneath them. For a long moment, the throne room was silent. Mara stared at Skywalker, wondering if he understood what he was saying. To offer to voluntarily stay here with Sabaoth. His gaze flicked sideways again to meet hers, and even through the buzzing in his mind, she could feel his private dread. He knew what he was saying, all right, and he meant it. If Sabaoth accepted his offer, he would go willingly with the insane Jedi, sacrificing himself to save his friends, including the woman who'd once promised to kill him. She turned away, suddenly unable to watch. Her eyes found Card, half hidden behind the wreckage of the catwalk as he knelt between his two Vornskers, stroking them, talking quietly to them, probably calming them down after that force-driven tantrum of Sabaoth's. She peered at the animals, but they didn't seem to be hurt. Her head movement must have caught Card's eye. He looked up at her, his face expressionless. Still patting the Vornskers, he tilted his head fractionally towards Solo and Organa Solo. Frowning, Mara followed his gaze, and froze. Beside the section of catwalk wreckage still half covering his wife, Solo was moving. Slowly, a couple of centimeters at a time, he was creeping across the floor. Towards the blaster Organa Solo had dropped. You asked too much, Skywalker, Sabaoth warned softly. Mara Jade will be mine. Must be mine. It is the destiny demanded of her by the Force. Not even you may trifle with that. Right, Mara put in, looking back at Sabaoth and putting all the sarcasm into her voice as she could manage. Whatever the risks to herself, she had to draw as much of Sabaoth's attention away from the other end of the throne room as she could. I still have to kneel at your feet, remember? You insult me, Mara Jade, Sabaoth said, turning an evil smile on her. Do you really believe me so easy to mislead? Still watching her, he crooked a finger. And as Solo's hand stretched out towards it, the blaster twitched another half-meter out of his reach. From the guard platform came a subtle change in hum. Skywalker, look out! Mara snapped. Skywalker spun around, lightsaber igniting again and swinging up into defense. The clone, his wind or his courage back, was already halfway through his leap, his lightsaber slicing downward. The two blades met with a crash and an impact that drove Skywalker backward to the edge of the stairway. He took one step more, fought for balance, then dropped off to the floor below. Mara threw a quick look at Solo as the clone charged over the edge in pursuit. If the clone really was an extension of Sabaoth's mind. But no. Even as Solo tried again for the blaster, it again slid away from him. Whatever effort Sabaoth was expending on the lightsaber duel, he clearly still had enough concentration left to toy with his prisoners. You see, Mara Jade? Sabaoth asked quietly. His fury had passed. The brief flicker of fun as he toyed with his prisoners had passed, and now it was time to return to the important business of building his empire. It is inevitable. I will rule, and along with Skywalker and his sister, you will serve at my side, and we shall be great together. Abruptly, he took a long step back from the guardrail on the other side of the stairway. Just in time. An instant later, Skywalker was backflipping up from the lower throne room floor. He landed with his back to Mara, floundering a moment as he fought to recover his balance. There was another flash of light, blue-white this time, as the clone leapt up over the guardrail in pursuit, swinging his lightsaber in vicious horizontal arcs to guard against attack. Skywalker moved backward out of his way, Glancing past him, Mara saw Sabaoth take a hasty backward step of his own. The clone hit the floor and charged, lightsaber still slashing towards Skywalker in wide horizontal arcs. Skywalker continued to give way, apparently unaware that he was backing towards the solid rock wall, against which he would be trapped. They passed by, and Mara looked over to find Sabaoth once again gazing at her. "As I said, Mara Jade," he said, "inevitable. And with you and Skywalker beside me, the lesser peoples of the galaxy will flock to us like leaves in the wind. Their hearts and their souls will be ours." He looked across the room and beckoned. Still crouching behind the catwalk wreckage, Card jerked in surprise as his blaster rose from his holster and shot through the air towards Sabaoth. Halfway there, it was joined by Organa Solo's dropped lightsaber, and the blaster Solo was still doggedly trying to chase down. "As will their insignificant weapons," Sabaoth added. Holding a negligent hand out to receive them, he turned his eyes back to the duel about to play itself to its conclusion. It was the chance Mara had been waiting for, possibly the last chance she would ever have. Reaching through the chaos surrounding her mind, she stretched out to the Force, focusing her eyes and mind on the weapons flying across the room towards Sabaoth's hand. She felt his inattentive control snap, and Organa Solo's lightsaber arced away from the blasters to land firmly in her hand. Sabaoth spun back to face her, the blasters falling with a clatter onto the stairway. "No!" he screamed, his face twisted horribly with fear, confusion, and dread. Mara felt his sudden frantic tug fumbling at the lightsaber, but it too was twisted with confusion and dread, and this time he didn't have surprise on his side. Given time, he would recover from the shock, but Mara had no intention of giving him that time. Igniting the lightsaber, she charged. The clone must have heard her coming, of course. The distinctive sound of her lightsaber made that inevitable. But with Skywalker backed up against the wall, the temptation to finish off one opponent first was too great to resist. He swung one last time, his lightsaber slashing into the wall as Skywalker ducked low beneath the blade. And with a brilliant flash of shattered electronics, the wall exploded outward, over Skywalker's head and directly into the clone's face. Skywalker hadn't been backing into a wall after all. He'd been backing into one of the throne room's view screens. The clone shrieked, the first sound Mara could remember hearing him make, as he staggered backward. He spun towards the sound of her lightsaber, his face twisted with anger and fear, his eyes still dazzled. He raised his lightsaber to attack. "You will kill Luke Skywalker!" She ducked beneath the slashing blade, gazing into his face. Skywalker's face. The face that had haunted her nightmares for nearly 6 years. The face the Emperor had ordered her to destroy. "You will kill Luke Skywalker!" And for the first time she'd found Skywalker in his crippled X-Wing floating in deep space, she let herself give in to the voice swirling through her mind. With all of her strength, she swung her lightsaber and cut him down. The clone crumpled, his lightsaber clattering to the floor beside him. Mara gazed down at him, and as she took a ragged breath, the voice in the back of her mind fell silent. It was done. She had fulfilled the Emperor's last command, and she was finally free. And that's the end of the chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.